the silence of death. Everything was just in a silence that one cannot explain. And the only thing that broke this silence were screams in desperation.
There used to be a town here. 20,000 people once lived in the town of Yungay. When the earthquake came, 17,000 died here in 3 minutes. Their bodies now lie under the hardened mud. The people of Yungay didn't have a chance. The earthquake flattened the town, then shook 70 million tons of mud and ice from the top of the mountain. When the slide hit the ruins of Yungay, its speed was 200 miles an hour. The local doctor was one of the survivors of Yungay. Now he's come to plant a cross in the mud somewhere above his old house. 37 of the doctor's family died here. The earthquake broke open the graveyard, but the statue of Christ survived. The people of Yungay put it there after an avalanche 8 years ago. The statue was to protect them against the mountain. The only survivors this time were the people who got to the graveyard and the statue before the mud came. The peasants of Peru are used to suffering. There have been 9 disastrous earthquakes in the last 30 years. This time, aid has poured in from all over the world, and the immediate emergency is almost over. But Peru's hope for far-reaching change is its new revolutionary government. It faces massive problems. Tonight, World in Action looks at the pressures for change in a country so poor that some parts were disaster areas even before the earthquake, the biggest natural catastrophe of modern times.
The only people that were saved were the people that managed to make it up to that Christ, that little graveyard. This whole area where you see the slide, this valley, was populated with buildings, houses, and people. And it completely took them away. There's about 3 to 5 meters worth of mud. We fly all up and down the Wadas Valley, which we're crossing at 14,500, 16,500 with helicopters to resupply villages. And the only other place that would be comparable to it would be the Himalayas, the Himalayan mountains. We have severe turbulence due to high winds, and especially in the afternoons. These winds switch directions all the time, and the pilot has to be alert at all times to keep control of his machine.
For U.S. Army helicopter pilots flying relief operations, Peru presents unique problems. For relief workers on the ground, the difficulties are equally severe.
There are so many evidences of what it is to live in an underdeveloped country that come so graphically to the front in this crisis that we're in right now. There was no equipment to handle the disaster, for instance. There were no helicopters to get into the Callejon de Huaylas. There were no hospital facilities. There were no medical men on the scene. There are no highly trained technicians to run pharmacies during the time of crisis. All of these had to be brought in.
Peru's problems begin with its geography. The 13.5 million people have to struggle for living space against some of the most inhospitable country on earth, where the Andes Mountains soar up to over 22,000 feet. Centered on Chimbote, the earthquake devastated an area the size of Britain. But the region worst hit was the Callejon de Huaylas, a remote valley 10,000 feet up in the Andes. Here were the towns of Huaraz and Yungay, where 40,000 people died. But the peasants of the mountains seem centuries away from Lima, the modern capital with its promise of a social revolution.
maybe like, you know, the old saying, out of sight, out of mind. And with being so far away from the capital, which is the center of Peru, when you speak of Peru, you speak of Lima. Because in Lima, everything functions.
And from Lima comes the revolution. In 1968, a group of left-wing colonels seized power and began a series of sweeping social and economic changes. First, the government confiscated the largest American oil interest in Peru, provoking a major row with the US government. Now the revolutionary colonels are breaking up the great estates and giving the land to the peasants. They've also promised to nationalize mines, banks and industry. President Juan Velasco Alvarado.
El objeto de nuestra revolución, o la finalidad de nuestra revolución, es hacer un nuevo Perú.
The object of our revolution, the aim of our revolution, is to make a new Peru. We want our forgotten people, the great majority who live in utter poverty and misery, lacking food and medical supplies, lacking education, lacking everything. We want these people to have everything they need, like civilized men. Every government of Peru has forgotten these people.
For the peasant, the one hope of escape has been the city.
Chimbote really amounts to something like a dream city for most of the people from the Sierra. As bad as things are there, they're so much better here. It's like the Wild West boom town that grows up overnight.
These men are Catholic priests. They're trying to organize trade unions in the port of Chimbote. 800 people died here, and most of the hovels were destroyed. It is, and was, the most wretched place.
It's the Peruvian monster that has all the problems of fierce growth. Within 15, 20 years, you go from 4,000 to over 200,000 people. And you have the rankest capitalism just coming in and sucking all the money, and nothing stays here. This is the terrible fact that they did not want people living here, but there was an invasion of the people. See, and then they set up these streets, and even now, after years up here, they have no water, very little light by private means of a motor, and no drainage, of course, and no paved roads.
Interesting to note that this is the #1 fishing port in the whole world in terms of tonnage of fish caught. This place, for a place that has such wealth in its hands, to see so many people living in such misery, this is just the supreme picture and contradiction of the whole place. It has great wealth in its own hands, and yet it's all sucked right out. La Caleta is a hospital built in 1945. It has 55 beds. Chimbote has a population now of 207,000. This one hospital did the work during the earthquake. We have another hospital that was built 6 years ago by the government. This was an anti-seismic building, they said. This building was wiped out immediately in the beginning. It's still standing in a sense, but it can't be used. The only thing that could function during the time of crisis was the emergency room.
But isn't it almost beyond comprehension that one hospital remains the same with 55 beds for 25 years? I mean,
Well, that's
why? Why does it just remain like
yeah, I
that?
think you have a certain sense of priorities, you know, and
Well, this too,
health,
I think,
health isn't a priority around here.
The only road up from Chimbote into the worst devastated valley and the towns of Huaraz and Yungay. The pass, 13,000 feet up in the mountains, still has to be dynamited to keep the road clear. the airstrip at Anta, 10,000 feet up in the Andes, the center of relief operations for the devastated Callejón de Huaylas and the towns of Huaraz and Yungay. Reports of the disaster first met with disbelief. Then came the rush of international aid. The Americans swallowed their pride and sent down Mrs. Nixon and $10 million. The Cubans showed their solidarity with the revolution through a massive aid operation which provided everything from plastic sandals to a pint of Castro's blood. Finally, the Russians lumbered in with a dozen giant planes and $30 million of aid. The aid race had become a political contest. The president responds to aid from east and west with gratitude and caution.
Bueno, pueden haber entre los objetivos que estamos resolviendo.
We can see amongst the objectives which we're trying to accomplish some similarity with the problems which Cuba has already resolved, but this does not mean to say that the philosophy of our revolution is the same as that of Cuba.
Que nuestra revolución sea igual a la de Cuba. Nosotros no, como le dije anteriormente, Cuba es un país y el Perú.
As I have said before, Cuba is one country and Peru is another. Peru has said, and I always repeat this, that it is neither with the capitalism of the right nor with the communism of the left.
To date, the total aid sent by the British government is £25,000. Relief organisations in Britain have raised more than £200,000. Anta's other traffic is in people. The refugees want to leave the harshness of the mountains for the squalor of the towns.
The quake came with all its force right from the beginning. There was no little movement or anything. It just came and everything began to fall.
It was like if you was being in the sea. The waves was coming and it was very hard to stand up and the people was going down.
They were calling on our Lord and our Blessed Lady to save them and to help them. And all you could hear were the screams of the people. Really, the screams of the people, and the children almost cut out the noise of the earthquake.
Those people survived the devastation of Huaraz. More than 15,000 people died here. 3/4 of Huaraz was leveled. The mud brick adobe houses of the poor just crumbled. But a few modern buildings survived. They were made of concrete. But the peasants of the Huaraz Valley can't afford concrete. They're rebuilding in mud, making the same 40-pound adobe bricks which killed so many in the earthquake.
I doubt very much that they will change their ways, their manners of construction. They probably won't build two-story houses out of adobe anymore till they can't afford what they call noble material, like bricks and cement. Their ways of construction will go right ahead with adobe for the poor people's housing.
El cuerpo de Cristo guárdenos para la vida eterna. Y no nos dejes caer en la tentación, mas líbranos del mal. Líbranos, Señor, de todos los males y concédenos la paz en nuestros días, para que, ayudados por tu misericordia, vivamos siempre libres de pecado y protegidos de toda perturbación, mientras esperamos la gloriosa venida.
The homeless, very many of them now are living in tents. This type of tent is said to be waterproof. It'll shed a little bit of water, and they'll make it through the first couple of rainstorms. During a long rainy season, a tent can be very small.
The valley is filled with thousands of temporary tents where the homeless wait while the relief organizations and the government race the coming rains. Scattered among the tents are primitive shacks built by peasants. They will not keep out 5 months of freezing rain. The position is serious. In the next 2 months, the homeless must be securely housed, or there'll be another catastrophe when the rains come.
You push it any more down, Joe?
Yeah. The estimates that we've heard go from maybe 20,000 to 90,000 families with, homeless, shelterless. I think we're going to be hard put to get them all under a roof before it starts to rain.
One rehousing scheme is being built by the U.S. Peace Corps. The Americans are worried by the slowness and fatalism of their peasant helpers, and so far only a score of houses have been built on this site.
From what I've seen of the way the people have been working here, usually in a crash program, people work overtime and work Sundays and work Saturdays. The people have been working their 7-hour day. They don't seem to be pushing any special projects that would indicate the immensity of the emergency. As far as housing for all of the people that need housing by the end of August, that I really seriously think that's very difficult at the speed they're going.
A few miles down the road, the government has started an ambitious rehousing project for 36,000 people. They promise eventually to accommodate 130,000 in this valley. The Peace Corps workers are plainly skeptical of these claims.
They're very nice houses, but they're very small. They're only 18 square meters for a family of 6, and they're in barracks of 10 units. One unit houses 10 families, and with only as small as partition between the families, I think it's going to be rather inhuman. However, we'll take anything we can, because we certainly are not going to quibble about what kind of houses they're in, as long as they're in some kind of house by the rains.
Those are some of the immediate problems confronting the Peruvian government. Soon, when the emergency period ends and the foreign relief teams begin to pull out, the Peruvians must face their problems alone. The French team in Huaraz has been nursing the injured and flying out survivors for 5 weeks. Tomorrow, the French go home. Tonight, they relax. International aid has saved the lives of many peasants, but only a thoroughgoing revolution will change them. Centuries of hopeless poverty have numbed the will of the peasants to help themselves. It remains to be seen whether the Lima-based revolutionaries can reach up into the mountains and mobilize these people.
I think most of the aid will get to the people that need it. I think that it's going to take some time before it gets here. The Peruvian government is too young and too involved in their revolution in order not to come through. People are getting stuff. I mean, the blankets, the food and stuff like that is being delivered to the people. If you're talking about a long-range future, we'll redivide the land. The cities are going to be replanned, moved, some of them evacuated to an extent. These are all long-range plans, and we hope to have more time to think about them during the rains. Once, and also if we ever beat the rains.
Bueno, en cuanto al cambio de mentalidad de nuestro indio, no se va a lograr.
The problem is that the change of mentality of our Indians will not come as quickly as the reconstruction of cities or the rebuilding of industry and agriculture. The change of mentality has to come about in a slow way, because for ages these people have been forgotten and abandoned.
Esa gente vive desamparada. Nunca un gobierno peruano.
Never has a Peruvian government, nor any world organization, tried to solve the problem of people like these. There are about 5 million of them, and they are forgotten. This change of mentality will come, but little by little.
Pero poco a poco.
Lima, 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 de nuevo. Lima, 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 falta uno. Falta un litro nada más para Lima, vamos.
A bus driver in Huaraz selling seats to Lima. Since the earthquake, business has been good. Before the earthquake, Lima was already growing by 200,000 people every year. Now the disaster has quickened the flow of migration from the mountains to the towns. In the past few weeks alone, 50,000 refugees have moved down to the overcrowded city of Chimbote. It's in cities like Chimbote that Peru must struggle for its future. The priests working to organize these people in Chimbote now feel a stirring of hope. They believe that the shock of the earthquake also caused a social awakening amongst the poor.
You see, nothing effectively has been changed because the fishing goes on as usual and the steel plant goes on as usual. So nothing essentially economically has changed, just the living quarters, which in a certain sense hasn't changed either, unfortunately. If you ask the question, for instance, what is the revolution doing for these people, then I think you're focusing in on what is the revolution. Because what's the people doing for themselves? That's a revolution. And the people must collaborate with each other. The fact that they're not only talking about this, but really trying to do something is the beginning of a revolution. You can't expect an overnight change.
Meanwhile, just to add to all Peru's problems, high in the mountains above Yungay are 2 overflowing lakes and another potential disaster.
These are the lakes that are now threatening the same area with another deluge of water. Melting ice and snow up is forming up more and more water in those lakes, and it's getting to a point where they just won't hold. The engineers are in there right now. We're trying to find out a way to relieve the water pressure.
That night, the engineers found a way, and the dam was held. The revolutionary government had proved this once to its fatalistic peasants that the will of men can sometimes thwart the acts of God.